You're nothing but a broken down computer, Dad. Always logging, numbering things nobody cares about. Honestly, you're an embarrassment. Mark's eyes were dry as he spoke, like he was reading from a verdict. Amber stood beside him and placed the folder on the table with cold precision. The bold letters sliced into my vision. Authorization to cremate. Sign it, Dad. You have 48 hours. Otherwise, you can forget about seeing a dime from the insurance. The coffee cup in my hand trembled slightly. Jason stared at the floor, his fingers tapping the rhythm on his knee, his silence siding with a stronger party. A pen lay waiting in front of me, like a velvet-wrapped trap. They thought a single signature was enough to bury Linda, and to bury my voice along with her. I looked up, speaking slowly, letting each word land like a lead weight. If this is what you call convenience, then you'd better remember one thing. Convenience is just the fastest way to bury the truth. No one breathed. Mark sneered. Amber tapped a fingernail on the folder, steady as a second hand. Jason looked up halfway. Then his gaze dropped back to the floor. If you're feeling a chill right now, then good, because what comes next is even colder. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you? And where are you listening? I never thought the day would come so soon that I'd be standing in a VFW hall sending off my own wife. They call this place a second home for old vets like me, with its smell of old wood, the neatly hung American flag, and the ancient coffee maker that always brews a dark, bitter sludge. I stood in the corner of the room, the hot coffee trembling slightly in my hands. It wasn't because of my age, and not entirely from emotion. The shaking felt more like a signal, a warning that something about this service was wrong. The casket was closed. Due to CO exposure, it's better not to open it, they said. I listened, nodding, but a heavy feeling settled in my gut. This wasn't some stranger. This was Linda, the woman I'd spent nearly 40 years with. Yet today, even a final glance was stolen from me, justified by the cold, sterile phrase, health and safety. They called it a convenience for me. I called it erasing the evidence. Pastor Rick read the eulogy, his voice a steady monotone, as if he'd recited it a dozen times before. I noticed even he glanced at me from time to time, as if waiting to see when I would sign. In the back pew, I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Gable from next door, craning her neck to see through the doorway. I wondered if she saw a funeral or a poorly staged play. Just as the final amen faded, Mark, my eldest, walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. His eyes were dry, filled only with a sense of impatience. Dad, let me and Amber handle the paperwork. The sooner it's done, the less stress for you. He stressed the word sooner, like he was driving a nail into the air. Amber stood right behind him, a folder already in her hand. White paper, bold letters, authorization to cremate. I barely had time to read the heading before my heart seized up. They weren't giving me a moment to think. Amber pulled up a chair and set a pen down in front of me. Her voice was soft, but cold. Sign it, Dad. We need to get this taken care of within 48 hours. That's all the insurance covers. The coffee cup in my hand felt heavier than ever. I could hear my heart pounding, not from grief, but from suspicion. 40 years together, and Linda deserved more than a rushed signature and a basic cremation package. I looked down at the form and noticed the case number printed in the bottom corner. Case number CO1142. I repeated it in my head, committing it to memory. I used to be a long-haul trucker, made a living remembering license plates, order numbers, departure times. Today, I would remember these numbers too. I took the pen, but the nib wouldn't touch the paper. In that moment, I looked up and saw Jason, my youngest, staring at the floor, tapping his fingers on his knee. He couldn't meet my eyes. I realized his silence was the answer. Something was wrong, and he knew it, but he wasn't talking. I stood up. The reason was simple. I needed air. I walked out the main entrance of the VFW hall and took a deep breath. Gus, my buddy from the post, came up beside me. His voice was half joking, half serious. Tom, didn't you have a CO detector in your house? How come it didn't go off that night? I froze. The first crack in the wall of their accident story had just appeared. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A text from an unknown number. I opened it and read the words slowly. I'm alive. Not my body. Don't sign. Don't go home tonight. I read it again and again. Each word was a hammer blow to the skull. Linda was alive? Then who was in that casket? And why shouldn't I go home? I sat back down, my hand tightening around the phone, sweat beaded on my forehead. Mark walked over, his eyes searching mine. Dad, are you done? Don't take too long. The funeral costs are adding up by the hour. I just nodded, shoving the phone deep into my pocket, keeping my face a mask of calm. I knew I wasn't signing anything today. And I'll remember this moment. 2:27 p.m. VFW Hall, authorization to cremate case number CO1142. One day, these numbers would speak for me. In the suffocating air of the hall, I could feel their eyes on me. They didn't need words. Their stares were enough. Are you going to sign? But I didn't. I just stayed silent, slowly placing the pen on the table, like an old chess player deciding to hold his move. Amber's hug afterward was hollow. A performance for the crowd, not for me. Mark's laugh echoed from behind me, a little too loud, a little too bright, just like the laugh of someone trying to hide a deep crack in the foundation. I knew this tragedy wasn't over. And that short code text message had shifted my role from grieving husband to something else entirely. An observer, a verifier, and maybe the only one sane enough to hold on to the truth. The morning was cold enough that I had to run the heater in my truck for 10 minutes before driving home. Late March in Ohio is like that. The sun's up, but the grass is still covered in a cold dew, and the smell of gasoline from a neighbor's mower hangs in the air. I killed the engine and sat there in the Silverado, my hands gripping the steering wheel, wondering what the hell I was doing. Linda, the woman they put in a sealed casket last night, was supposed to be at peace. But that text message, I'm alive, not my body, don't sign, don't go home tonight, felt like a nail hammered into my temple. I was her husband. I had to know for sure. The front door lock was still shiny. I slid the key in and it turned smoothly. No pry marks. No muddy footprints. Inside, the house smelled like us. Wood, polish, stale coffee, and the scent of yesterday's half-finished laundry. Nothing screamed crime scene. But the most dangerous things are usually silent. I didn't go to the living room. I turned into the garage. The heavy roll-up door hung on its faded steel tracks. I've spent enough of my life around truck grease to know the difference. There was a fresh streak of grease on the track, still slick and free of dust. I touched it with my finger, it was still wet. You don't call a garage repairman in the middle of the night, and I didn't remember touching it. So who did? In the garage, the faint smell of gasoline hung in the air like an old memory. Not strong enough to be suffocating, but it was clear someone had been cleaning. I looked up at the ceiling. Wiring, ventilation ducts, a fluorescent bulb. A mess to most people, but to me, it was a map. And something on this map was wrong. Mounted on the corner wall was the KDK NCOBDP 2 carbon monoxide detector. I'd picked it because the alarm was loud enough to wake the neighbors. Today, it was silent. I twisted it off its mount and turned it over. The small screw had a fresh scratch, a bright sliver of metal where a screwdriver had recently been. I opened the battery compartment, empty. The backup battery was gone. Someone had removed it, and they'd done it carefully. I pulled out my phone and took pictures from several angles. Then I grabbed a zip-top bag from the truck's glove box, dropped the detector's cover inside, and wrote on the bag with a marker, Kitty KNCOBDP2, battery cover 08, 11 a.m. I used to log bills of lading, now I was logging evidence. My hands were shaking, but my mind was sharp. In the kitchen, I checked the breaker box. The metal door popped open with a light touch, the seam around it clean as a fresh cut. The breaker labeled Living Divided by Hall had a shiny new scratch on it. I remember the power going out last night, but when I checked the power company's app, the graph was flat from 9:58 p.m. to 10:15 p.m. 17 minutes. Long enough for everything to go dark, from the security cameras to the detectors. I made a note. Smart meter log number SM1712, power outage 21:58:22:15. Back at the front door, I opened the doorbell camera app. The log showed 9:50 p.m. motion, driveway. 10:11 p.m. keypad entry. Code accepted. Front door. No key. No one rang the bell. Someone had come in with the code. I knew it. Linda knew it. Mark and Jason knew it. Maybe Amber. I saved a screenshot, naming it Ring 2211. The sound of shuffling slippers pulled me away from the screen. Mrs. Gable, my neighbor, was watering her plants, watching me over the fence. She spoke slowly, as if afraid of hurting me. I saw Amber's car parked out front last night, around 9:50. I heard a laugh. It was unusual. It didn't sound like someone who was grieving. I thanked her. She ducked her head and hurried away, as if she said too much. To me, though, her words were the first piece of corroboration from the outside world. Back in the garage, I saw a partial shoe print on the concrete floor, smaller than my size, possibly a woman's. I laid a plastic ruler next to it and took a picture. I wasn't drawing conclusions. I was just collecting the pieces. In the kitchen, a dish towel next to the sink had a white streak on it, like a dry solvent. Linda hated using harsh chemicals. Amber, on the other hand, loved them. I carefully used tweezers to pick it up by the corner and placed it in a zip-top bag. Kitsch 01 white residue. Pause, solvent, 8:27 a.m. My phone buzzed. It was Jason. Are you home, Dad? His voice was tired. Yeah. Did anyone use the keypad code at 10:11 last night? No. I was at Mark's place. Dad, don't go looking into this yourself. Let Mark handle it. That phrase, let Mark handle it, sounded like a leash he was putting on his older brother. I just said, okay, and hung up. A few minutes later, Mark called. Dad, they need a signature before noon. The insurance only covers 48 hours. You remember rider number BL 48 hours, right? We don't want the fees to go up. His voice was too smooth, like he was reading from a script. I asked him straight, who used the keypad at 10:11? A pause. He deflected. Probably a technician from the alarm company. I hung up. I didn't want to give him time to invent another story. I grabbed an old cable lock from the garage and secured the side door. The back door, the kitchen window, I checked them all. I wrote in my notebook, garage, fresh grease on track. Seal detector, battery removed, new scratch on screw. Breaker box, scratch lever. Smart meter number SM1712. 17-min power outage. Doorbell lock number ring 2211. Keypad entry 2211. Kitchen towel Kutch 01. Solvent residue. Neighbor's testimony. Amber's car 2150. Unusual laughter. I carefully folded the notebook and put the USB drive with the photos in my breast pocket. As I locked the front door and walked away, I saw Mrs. Gable pull her curtains aside. Yesterday, I thought, they watch me, waiting for a signature. Today, they watch me lock up my own house. The eyes of the world are always open. I sent a text to the unknown number. House is secure. Have logs of 17 minutes outage. Keypad 2211. CO. Detector W divided by no battery. Have photos on USB. 3 p.m. Coffee shop on the corner. The reply came back fast. Seen. Don't stay there. Bring the USB. I put the phone away, my hand clenching it in my pocket. The USB drive felt as heavy as a stone. On the way to my truck, I bent down and snapped a picture of a narrow tire track on the curb. Could be a crossover, could be Amber's car. It wasn't hard evidence, but sometimes it's the small scratches that reveal what's underneath. Sitting in the truck, I looked in the rearview mirror. The house looked normal, the roof clean, the lawn green. Nothing screamed crime scene, but I had enough. 17 minutes of darkness, one keypad entry, one useless detector, and one laugh at the wrong time. The first domino had fallen, and I was going to count every single one that followed. I chose to walk to the bank this morning instead of driving, partly to get some air, and partly to get a clear look at every window, every sign along Main Street. I've learned at my age that when your head's a mess, it helps to put your feet to work. Your eyes tend to catch things you normally miss. I walked into the small branch of First County Bank, where Linda and I kept our retirement savings. The automatic glass door slid open, and the air smelled of printer ink and stale coffee. Everything felt normal, except for the tightness in the back of my neck. I need a copy of our 90-day statement, I told the young teller. She typed, printed, and slid a thick stack of papers across the counter. I thanked her, took it, and sat down in a nearby fabric chair. I went through the pages like a man sorting through old cards. Numbers don't lie. A cash withdrawal for $1,000 on January 17th. The transaction ID was printed clearly, TXID 0117. Another for $3,000 on February 12th, TXID-0212. And the $4,000 on March 16th, TXID 0316. Three separate numbers, meaningless on their own. But lined up like this, they were a crack in the foundation. Linda had never withdrawn more than $300 in her life. Her pension was enough for groceries and bills. I handled the rest. Why, in just 3 months, would she take out 3 large escalating amounts? I asked to see the withdrawal slips. The teller hesitated, looked around, then nodded. "One moment, sir." She brought out 3 slips, neatly clipped together. The signature on them read Linda O. Carter. At a glance, it looked like hers, but I'd lived with that woman for over 40 years. I knew her hand. Linda's signature was firm, neat, written with a strong, confident stroke. This one was shaky. The pressure of the pen was light, and the loop on the L was tilted at an odd angle. It wasn't Linda's hand. "Do you have security footage?" I asked. "We keep it for 12 months. I'll have to get the manager." A moment later, Mrs. Calhoun, the branch manager, appeared. She was in her 50s with dyed brown hair and silver-rimmed glasses. She gave me a practiced, everything is by the book smile and led me into a small office. On the CCTV monitor, dated March 12, 12:16 p.m., the image was clear. Amber was standing next to Linda. Linda was seated, her head down, while Amber slid the slip into an envelope and then took the envelope of cash. The file was saved as BBR12MAR MP4. I took the USB drive the bank gave me, put it in my coat pocket, and made a note. CCTV Amber present, BBR12MAR. I left the bank, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. Amber could say, Linda forgot her glasses and asked me to help her read. But the video was clear. Amber was the one who took the envelope. Her movements were efficient, like someone picking up a pizza. I remember her eyes last night as she placed the pen in front of me. Calm, practiced. It wasn't the first time. That afternoon, I went to the insurance office. The agent handling the case, a Mrs. Howells, handed me a copy of Linda's life insurance policy. I read it carefully. 6 months ago, Mark had advised her to increase her policy from $150,000 to $400,000. The reason? To protect the future. The advisory email was saved in the file. MKINS6M. 2 months ago, a household accident rider was added. Rider number, Home Act 22. I read it again, a chill running down my spine. A household accident, when Linda had supposedly died from CO poisoning. Exactly the kind of accident that would trigger a double payout. I looked Mrs. Howells straight in the eye. Put a hold on this claim. I want all processing stopped. Log this call. Give me a reference code. She typed on her computer, then confirmed. Call log number CL 559. I jotted it down in my notebook. Policy increased 6 months. Rider added 2 months. Everything had a date, a paper trail. It wasn't just talk. Just as I left the office, a new email notification popped up on my phone. The subject, funeral home, authorization on file. The body read, please confirm cremation authorization, signature on file received. I stood still in the parking lot, the wind whipping the smell of exhaust in my face. Someone had sent them a scanned copy of Linda's signature. They thought I wouldn't check. They thought I'd just believe them. I remember Mark's words from yesterday. It's just a formality, Dad. A formality. To me, formalities were delivery times, bill of lading numbers, signed receipts. If they didn't match up, you had a problem. And right now, nothing was matching up. I sat in my truck, opened my notebook, and wrote line by line. TXID 0117. $1,000 withdrawn, slip signature, shaky, wrong pressure. TXID 0212, $3,000. Same. DXID 0316, $4,000. Amber present video. BBR12MAR. MP4. Policy increased 6 months prior. Advisory email MKINS6M. Writer number HomeAct22 added 2 months prior. No real home signature on file. I stuck a yellow sticky note to the page. Check original scan. I leaned back, resting my forehead in my hand. Linda didn't have a tremor when she signed her name. She signed hundreds of checks, written countless letters. If the signature on those slips was shaky, it either wasn't Linda or she was being forced. And Amber was right there, taking the envelope like it was nothing. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't let myself cry. I chose a quiet, simmering anger instead. The bank, the insurance, the funeral home, 3 pieces of a puzzle. They all pointed to the same thing. A pre-planned, calculated scenario. I wasn't telling anyone. Not Jason, not my friends. I was just gathering evidence. Because I understood now. You can't trust words, only documents. On the drive back, I called the funeral home again. Keeping my voice steady, I have not signed anything. Do not use any scanned signature. I am requesting a hold, they replied. Noted, case number CO1142. Status is now hold. I wrote it down, hold confirmed, CL559. But a deep chill settled in my gut. If they already had a scanned signature, it meant someone was a step ahead of me. Someone who wasn't afraid to forge Linda's name. Someone who wanted everything finished in 48 hours, before I had time to connect the dots. I started the truck, looking in the rearview mirror. The neighborhood was busy, people carrying groceries, kids riding bikes. No one else could see the crack in the foundation of my family, but I could, and I knew the second domino had fallen. Dinner at Mark's house was as carefully staged as a performance. Cars lined the driveway, the golden porch light was on, and through the large picture window, I could see a long dining table draped in a white cloth. I walked up the steps, a cold bottle of root beer in my hand. Amber opened the door, her smile as bright as if she'd just won an award. "Dad, you made it. This is wonderful," she announced, loud enough for the entire living room to hear. In the kitchen, the new marble countertops gleamed, and the custom cabinets closed silently like display cases. Amber ran her fingers over the stone, letting out a performative sigh. Perfect. Now we finally have a kitchen we deserve. I watched that hand and saw my retirement savings turn into a decorative fixture. The guests were a mix. Amber's colleagues, a few people from the PTA, neighbors from the HOA. They laughed, poured wine, and traded pleasantries. No one mentioned the funeral. No one asked if I was okay. But I saw the quick, flickering glances in my direction, the way people check to see if the weather is about to turn. Mark came in from the patio, carrying a platter of sizzling steaks. He clapped me on the shoulder, his laugh a little too loud. "Here's the old man of the house, Dad's best at signing checks." A short, fractured laugh went around the table. A woman from the PTA suddenly became fascinated with the sole of her shoe. The air grew a half beat heavier. I didn't smile. I just said, "The steak smells good." But the funeral home emailed me. They're asking about an authorization on file, said they received a scanned signature. Who sent it? A muscle tightened in Mark's neck. "Dad, it's just a formality. We're trying to make things easier for you." "I like easy," I said slowly. "But I'd like to know who sent it even more." I looked directly at Amber. Amber poured a glass of wine for a guest, then turned back, smiling. It was just an old file of Mom's they had on record. "Dad, they already had it. I just helped them locate it. Don't you worry." I pulled out my notebook and flipped to the marked page. Last night at 10:48 p.m., I got an email confirming a private service per family request message ID number PS1048. This morning, another about a signature on file. But I haven't signed anything, so I need to know who submitted it. Jason, standing by the sink, froze. He stared down into a bowl of salad as if the answer were hiding the lettuce. I continued in a steady voice. The power was out for 17 minutes that night, according to smart meter number SM1712. At 10:11 p.m., log number ring2211 shows someone entered the keypad code. In the garage, the battery was removed from the KDK-NCOB-DP2 detector. I want to know who entered the code, and why the power went out at that exact time. They're off by. Mark slammed the platter of meat down on the counter, the heavy thud echoing in the sudden silence. Dad, you're turning this dinner into an interrogation. We just want you to relax. I relax when the numbers add up, I replied flatly. So give me the fire department's incident number, the name of the responding crew, and their time of entry. The guests looked at each other. A few pairs of eyes slid away from the table, avoiding contact. The silence stretched until the hum of the dishwasher in the corner sounded loud. Amber opened a drawer, pulled out an envelope, and placed it on the table. Dad, please, calm down. This is a preliminary capacity letter from Dr. Mason. He thinks your grief might be making you susceptible to paranoia. We're considering asking the court for a competency evaluation only to protect you. I opened the envelope. The last line was printed clearly. Patient not seen. Provisional opinion only. I pointed to the words. This doctor has never met me. This opinion isn't a diagnosis. Mark cut in, his voice rising. It's part of the process. I'm trying to help you. But you're seeing conspiracies everywhere. I'm just seeing dates, I said. Linda's life insurance policy was increased 6 months ago, per email MKINS6M. Rider number HOMAC22 was added 2 months ago for exactly the kind of CO accident that supposedly happened. And video file BBR12 MAR MP4 shows Amber collecting the envelope of cash from the bank. That shaky signature wasn't Linda's. Linda never shook when she held a pen. Amber forced a laugh. Mom forgot her glasses, so I helped sign for her. It's not that complicated. Good. Then send me the original withdrawal slips and the full CCTV footage and the scanned signature the funeral home is holding. I closed my notebook and looked up at the entire table. I'll come by to pick them up tomorrow. The air froze. Mark crossed his arms, his voice heavy. If you keep this up, we'll have no choice but to file the petition, to have you declared incompetent. A fork clattered against the plate. The guests turned their faces away. I sat up straight, my breathing even, and said, Excellent. Let's start with rider number HOMEX22, then move to TXID 0316 from March 16th, the $4,000 withdrawal. After that, we can discuss the ring log from 10:11 p.m. And finally, the scanned signature you claim was on file. I'm not here to argue. I'm just asking for the codes, the dates, and the sources. Right here, right now. No one moved. Amber tried to smile again, her voice softening. Dad, we love you. We just need you to let us help with your finances, your medical care. Help means control. I cut her off, my voice quiet but sharp, in exchange for my silence. Jason finally spoke, his voice a whisper. Dad, just for tonight, let it go. I think, Jason, I looked right at him. I'm asking for the numbers. I'm not asking for faith. The music in the living room changed tracks, a lone guitar sounding as thin as a wire about to snap. Mark took a deep breath. Fine, we'll see you in court. Perfect, I nodded. This patient not seen letter won't be enough, but the fire department report, the smart meter log, and the policy rider will be. I stood up. Thanks for dinner. I placed the unopened bottle of root beer on the table, its seal intact. The guests watched me walk to the door like an audience that had stumbled into the wrong show. I could hear Amber's placating voice, Mark muttering about the difficulties of old age, and the sound of chairs scraping as they filled the space I had left. Outside on the porch, the air was cool. The streetlights cast a pale yellow glow. I walked down the steps, my hand touching the USB drive in my pocket. I didn't have to win tonight. I just had to hold on to the numbers. Number SM1712, ring 2211, MKINS6M, rider number HOMEAC22. Tomorrow, they will speak for me. The corner coffee shop opens before dawn, a place where long-haul truckers stop, grab a black coffee, no sugar, and are gone in 10 minutes. I picked a booth against the brick wall, positioned just right to see both the entrance and the old-fashioned wall clock. 7:15 a.m. I laid 3 things out in front of me. My black notebook, a felt-tip pen, and the small USB drive I always carried the habit from my trucking days. The smell of roasted coffee was sharp, mixed with the scent of frying donuts. The sound of a spoon clinked against the plastic of an iced drink. Outside the window, the street was still damp with morning mist. I waited, the door opened, and a man in a khaki jacket with trimmed shoulders and salt and pepper hair, walked in. He scanned the room, saw me, and came straight over. Without wasting a word, he set a plastic card on the table. Evan Pike, private investigator, State Lick, number Pi 47291. I'm the one who sent the text at the VFW, he said, his voice gravelly and firm. And yes, Linda hired me 3 weeks ago. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Linda. She never said a word, just left behind the lingering sense of unease. It turned out she had been preparing. Evan sat down and opened a leather satchel. He pulled out a red, sealed envelope labeled CHAINOFCUSTODY number EP044. He broke the seal and slid a black USB drive toward me. Exhibit A. Audio recordings WAV files with embedded time codes. Ohio is a one-party consent state. Only one party needs to know they're being recorded. You're the homeowner, so you authorize me to act on your behalf from this point forward, correct? I authorize you. I nodded, feeling the switch flip in my head. Say less, record correctly, keep the numbers. Evan opened his own notebook and read, Exhibit A1, the 10th of March 2025, 19 hours, 42 minutes and 18 seconds. Mark and Amber's voices in the kitchen. Raise it to 400, add the home mic writer, and lock it in before she changes her mind. If we're going to fast track this, we can't let the old man have time to interfere. He paused, letting the words fast track this hang in the air between us like a knife. A2, the 15th of March, 2025, 21 hours, 6 minutes, and 51 seconds. Methanol, the kind for stripping glue, cash, no trace, then wipe it clean. Mark, a 15-20 minute power outage is all it takes. The words methanol and all it takes were seared into my memory like a fresh weld. I didn't interrupt, just let him continue. Exhibit B. Evan laid out a stack of grainy photos. The first showed Amber in a beanie and large sunglasses, standing in front of a shelf of chemicals and Maple hardware. The second was a receipt, denatured alcohol, $26.99. Cash, timestamp the 15th of March 2025, 2042. Transaction number cash 5592. The final photo was a still from an internal security camera, showing Amber placing a metal can into a paper bag. Evan tapped the corner of the photo. The glue solvent is a plausible cover, but the timing, the payment method, they tell the rest of the story. I stared at the picture for a long time. That woman was Amber, neat, put together, but with a guarded look in her eyes. Linda used to praise her daughter-in-law's resourcefulness. Now I saw that resourcefulness had become a mask. Evan pulled out another set of papers. Exhibit C, financial IOUs, a statement for Mark's business credit card, $48,700 past due. A final notice from a payday lender, $21,000. An Excel sheet detailing creative PTA reimbursements totaling $12,400. The motive wasn't just money, it was social standing. In the PTA, the HOA, Mark and Amber lived on a facade of generosity. Once the head of the PTA gets a copy of this sheet, the ground will shift under them. I thought back to the dinner, the clinking glasses, and the line about how I was best at signing checks. The hollow laughter now sounded like an empty can rattling. Exhibit D, Evan continued, placing a printout of an email header on the table. Authorization to cremate. Signature on file. The header read, Received. Semen quays, co, quays a semen, co, each, quays, 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 co, quays, 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 h, quays, 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 h, quays, 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 h. The scanned signature was sent from Mark's home IP address. I hashed the file with SHA-256, its logged-in number EP044. This is a screenshot from Mark's Instagram story, bragging about his new MASH Wi-Fi system. The model and the MAC address match. You see, the source and destination connect. I took a deep breath. They thought I wouldn't look at an email header. I'd spend my life counting miles. Counting numbers was just as easy. Evan produced a smaller envelope. Exhibit F, call log 731. A recording of Mark calling the funeral director this morning. We have the scanned authorization. Proceed today if possible. The time code matches his cell phone's call detail records. He likes to brag so much he even posted a picture of his bill after switching to an unlimited plan. Evan smirked. Bragging is a form of testimony. The clock on the wall ticked to 7:44 a.m. Evan closed his notebook. Now, the plan. At 10 a.m., Mark is meeting with his lawyer to push the cremation through using that scan authorization. We have to stop him before he gets there. How? I asked. Step 1. You send a hold email to the funeral home. Step 2. I file for a TRO, a temporary restraining order, citing the risk of evidence destruction. Step 3. We deliver all of exhibits A through F to Sergeant Miller and Assistant DA Keller before 9:20 a.m. He pulled out a pre-filled form. Petition to preserve remains, Rule 27. You sign here and here. I'll e-file it immediately. If a judge signs off by 9:40, we'll have the TRO. In parallel, you send your hold email. Be specific. No authorization on file without a wet signature from Tom Carter. I signed, my hand steady. Evan copied the files into a folder labeled Tom Evidence, running a checksum on each one. I composed the email. Subject: Hold. Case number CO1142. No authorization on file. Body: I, Tom Carter, demanded indefinite hold on the cremation for case number CO1142. Any signature on file that is not my own wet signature is invalid. Please confirm receipt in writing. Sent 7:56 a.m. Evan submitted the petition at 7:59 a.m. and the system returned an e-receipt number PR77954 at 8:02 a.m. He nodded. We're moving. We left the coffee shop at 8:10 a.m. The sky was a pale gray, the wind carrying the smell of rain. At the station, Evan carried a thick binder, its spine clearly labeled A, audio, B, photos, divided by receipt, C, IOU, D, email header, E, chain of custody, F, call log. Sergeant Miller met us at the front desk. Evan laid out the chain of custody, his voice as formal as an oath. Miller listened, nodding at each point. If the TRO is signed, I'll call the funeral home myself. Assistant DA Keller walked in at exactly 9:18 a.m., wearing a gray blazer and carrying a large to-go coffee. Evan went through each exhibit, one by one, with a single sentence summary. Exhibit A, one-party consent audio recording. Exhibit B, methanol purchased with cash, matching the timeline of the power outage. I'll go see they. Exhibit C, IOUs and creative accounting social motive. Exhibit D, IP address from Mark's house send the scanned signature. Exhibit E, a complete and unbroken chain of custody. Exhibit F, a 7:31 a.m. call log pushing for an expedited cremation. Keller lingered on exhibits B and D. She nodded, then said, if the TRO comes through, I'll have the medical examiner take custody of the body and run a full toxicology screen. Mr. Carter, from this point on, have no direct contact with Mark or Amber. Everything goes through my office. At 9:36 del mattino, Evan's phone buzzed. A notification. Order granted. Probate court. Tro 13.809. 9:36 a.m. Preserve remains. No cremation. Evan let out a breath, but didn't smile. Serve. Miller was on the phone instantly. This is Sergeant Miller. The court has just signed the TRO. Case number CO1142 is now hold by court order. Confirm. The line was silent for a beat, then came the reply. Confirmed. 9:43 a.m. Evan faxed and emailed a copy of the TRO to the funeral home. Delivered, I pictured Mark, adjusting his tie, walking into his lawyer's office, confident that the easy part was almost over. But the body was now under a court order. Evan closed the binder and said quietly, Exhibit C, the PTA stuff, I haven't released that yet. When we need it, it will hit his reputation. I nodded. It was a long haul. You win by layering your defense. Keller stood up. We have custody of the body for now. Mr. Carter, leave the rest to us. Evan handed me a photo of Linda. She was sitting in this very coffee shop 3 weeks ago. Her hair pulled back, squinting into a smile. Underneath, in her handwriting, it said, for Tom, the bookkeeper. I slipped the photo into my black notebook. We left the station at 9:51 a.m. The clouds were thick, the wind cold. I knew that at exactly 10 a.m., Mark would be presenting his stack of papers with the scan authorization. And at that very moment, the email with troll number TR11809 was already sitting in the funeral home's inbox. One domino falls, and it takes the whole line with it. The morning was stretched taut. I was awake before the alarm, my hand already reaching for the black notebook on the nightstand to review last night's final entry. TRO number TR11809. Preserved remains, no cremation. I read it aloud to myself, like a long-haul driver checking his route sheet. Right stop, right time. Outside, the sky was still gray, the sound of sparse traffic drifting from the main road. I made a black coffee, swallowed down the metallic taste in my throat, and grabbed the USB drive, the notebook, and an envelope of printed out emails, the most legitimate weapons I had right now. Evan was waiting in front of the county courthouse. He wore a gray jacket, a thick label binder tucked under his arm. "Let's go, Tom," he said, his voice clipped. We passed through security, the metal detector beeping at the multi-tool in my pocket. A guard checked it, smiled, and waved me through. The courthouse hallway smelled faintly of paper and printer ink. I've seen my share of depots and loading docks, but this smell, the smell of procedure, was strangely reassuring. At 8:46 a.m., we reached the clerk's office. Evan placed a clipped stack of documents on the counter. Emergency court order. Case number EC229. The top right corner of the cover page was embossed with the court seal. Beside it, Evan laid out a copy of TRO number TR11809, the printed exhibits A through F, and the declaration with my signature. The silver-haired clerk looked up, her eyes scanning each page with swift precision. "You're the next of kin?" she asked, her tone neutral. "And the policyholder?" "I'm the legal spouse and the beneficiary on the policy," I replied, handing her copies of our marriage certificate and the insurance documents. "We're requesting an emergency order to unseal the casket and transfer the remains to the medical examiner." She nodded and typed a few keystrokes. "Case file EC229 is now open," she said. "The on-duty judge will review it immediately. Please have a seat in the waiting area." The plastic chairs were hard. The wall clock's second hand seemed to take longer than a second for each tick. I gripped my black notebook, not because I was nervous, but because I knew every minute was another bolt being tightened on the frame. At 8:59 a.m., a door behind the counter opened. A staffer brought out a 2-page document held by a black binder clip. The clerk read from it, "Emergency Court Order, EC 229. Grants the medical examiner permission to unseal, conduct toxicology sampling, and confirm identity. Orders the funeral home to maintain HOOD status." Signed at 8:58. Evan looked at me. I let out a slow breath. "The board just changed," I said quietly. The funeral home received the faxed and emailed order moments later. When we arrived, the white floral arrangements from the other day were still hanging by the entrance. The funeral director, Mr. Burns, came out, his face a mask of professional sorrow. He nodded a greeting to Sergeant Miller, who had met us in the parking lot. "We've received EC229, Burns said. "The remains are in the cold room. The coroner has just arrived." In the reception area, I saw Amber standing in the corner. She wore a black coat and sunglasses, her hair in a tight bun. Next to her was Mark, in a wine-colored tie and shoes polished to a mirror shine. Mark stared at the order in Miller's hand, his lips pressed into a thin line. Amber, however, took a half step forward, her voice restrained. "I object to this violation of my mother's body. This is torture for the living." Evan lifted his binder, opening it like a ceremony. "EC229 is based on TRO number TR11809 and the submitted exhibits," he said slowly. "We request that the medical examiner proceed with a full chain of custody." Mark snorted. "You're a private investigator, not a lawyer," he said. "We'll sue for procedural abuse." Miller took one step forward, his voice calm. "You have the right to retain counsel, but the court order has been issued. I'll ask you to maintain order." They led us down to the basement, the prep room. The air was cold, the fluorescent lights casting a blue-white glare. The coroner, a doctor, Ray, was waiting, gloved and masked, with 2 technicians behind her. On a stainless steel table, the remains lay under a white drape. A paper tag with the code CO1142 clipped to the corner. I could feel my own pulse beating a steady rhythm in my temples, but my hand on my pen was firm. We're beginning, Dr. Ray said, her voice devoid of excess emotion. Present. Medical Examiner Ray, Tech 1 and Tech 2. Sergeant Miller, Mr. Carter P.I. Pike, and a representative from the funeral home. Internal cameras are recording. Timestamp 9:37. She pulled back the drape. The air in the room dropped another degree. The victim's face was swollen, the skin discolored. I didn't recognize Linda. My throat tightened. I tried to find the mole on her collarbone. Linda had one there, as small as a sesame seed, but the area was bruised. I gripped the edge of my notebook and said nothing. Dr. Ray worked like a calibrated machine, noting epidermal discoloration and edema. She dictated, drawing blood from the femoral vein, collecting gastric fluid, liver tissue sample. Vials were placed one by one into a tray, labeled with time codes in neat, round handwriting. The chain of custody was read aloud by Tech 1 and recorded by Tech 2. No one spoke of anything but the procedure. Amber stood far back, her arms wrapped around herself. Mark had his arms crossed, his eyes darting toward Miller as if looking for a procedural flaw to seize upon. I looked at the victim's left arm, the soft veins under the skin, and remembered Linda hanging laundry in the yard, wearing her ivory-colored garden gloves. A wave of grief rose in me, but it was suppressed by something stronger than need for truth. About 20 minutes in, Tech 1 placed a rapid blood test strip on the side table, the kind used for preliminary blood typing. Dr. Ray nodded, giving the signal. I'm no doctor, but I understand logic. The cross-hatching test shows a result, OABAB. After a moment, Tech 1 looked up. Preliminary result is O. The room seemed to go hollow for a beat. I felt a cold shock travel up from the steel table through the soles of my shoes. Linda was A positive. I knew it for a fact 20 years ago. She'd collapsed from blood loss after a laparoscopic surgery. I had rushed to the blood bank to sign for an emergency donation A positive. I still have the blood bank receipt at home, in the wooden box under the bookshelf. A positive, that was a number you don't get wrong. Dr. Ray looked at Miller. Preliminary is O, she said. We'll send samples to toxicology and serology for confirmation. Amber let out a sharp gasp, as if she'd been slapped. She turned to Mark, her eyes wide, then back to me. The test is faulty, she said quickly. My mother was A. Everyone knows that. Miller's voice was even. The preliminary result is not A. We'll confirm with lab tests. The remains will be frozen under EC 229 until a final determination is made. Evan leaned in, his voice low enough for only me to hear. If the blood type doesn't match, we have two questions. Where is Linda? And who is on this table? Dr. Ray continued, her hands never stopping. The liver sample just came back from the rapid test. Traces of methanol at a level consistent with symptoms of cerebral edema and corneal opacity. I'll wait for the GCMS for quantification. I watched Tech 2 label a vial. Liver 957 GC miss. Each label was like a nail pinning the truth to the table. I swallowed hard. Methanol from the receipt for the glue solvent Amber had bought was now in the stranger's liver. Mark shattered the silence. I demand you close this up immediately. This is desecration of a body. Miller turned, his voice low and hard. You can file an appeal with the court, but until then, EC 229 is in charge of this room. If you obstruct this process any further, I will have to escort you out. Amber let out a sob, but it was the sob of someone calculating, not someone in despair. She tugged lightly on Mark's sleeve. We'll call our lawyer, she whispered. Tell him the test was faulty. Tell him that Tom is having delusions. I stood up a little straighter and put away my pen. It would be better, I said, my voice quiet but clear, if you try to remember the night the power went out. Who entered the code at 10:11 p.m. and why the CO detector's battery was removed. I spoke to the air, not pointing a finger, but the social eye in the room heard me clearly. At 10:12 a.m., the coroner read a summary. Preliminary report, unidentified female. Estimated age 55-60, deceased is less than 48 hours. Trace methanol in liver tissue. Preliminary serology is O. Identity unconfirmed. Recommending dental records and the fingerprints. Remains are to be frozen per EC 229. I signed the witness log next to the signatures of Miller, Ray, and Burns. My handwriting was calm, steady. I've signed for a lot of things in my life. Delivery, manifests, vehicle titles, barrels of reserve oil. No signature had ever carried this much weight, but my hand was firm. As we were leaving the prep room, Amber spun around, her eyes blazing. "You'll never find my mother if you keep this up," she said. "You're just prolonging the pain." "I'm shortening something else," I replied. "The distance between the story you're telling and the truth." In the hallway, Burns met us with a confirmation slip. Status, hold by court order. With a line added, EC 229 received, remains transferred to ME custody at 14. 0, 0. Evan put the slip in his binder, clipping it right behind the order. The chain of custody had another link. Miller stopped with me on the front steps. He looked me in the eye, not glancing away like he had the first day. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I've seen a lot of messy family disputes. Today, I'm starting to believe there's a real crime here. I'm sending this file to Major Crimes to work with DA Keller. But you know this is a long road." "I know long roads," I said. "I drove them my whole life." I handed him a note I'd written out, a list of markers. Rider number Homac 22, TXID 0117 divided by -02, 12 divided by -03, 16, number SM17, 12, ring 2211, BBR 12 MAR, MP4, and now EC 229 plus O blood type. He took it and nodded. Evan touched my elbow. "We have one more thing to do. Linda's dental records." "In the wooden cabinet, third drawer from the bottom." I answered instantly, as if giving the location of a spare part. "In an envelope from Dr. Klein's office. There's a Panorax from 2 years ago. Tooth number 14 has a composite filling. It's noted in blue ink." Evan gave a slight smile, the kind of a man who's just checked another box on his list. "You really are the bookkeeper," he said. My phone vibrated. An email from the funeral home confirming the hold status per EC 229. A second later, another email popped up from Amber, subject, "Can we talk?" I didn't open it. I forwarded it to Miller and Keller with the label, "For your information." We left the funeral home. The gray clouds had torn open a little, letting a pale light slide across the parking lot. I leaned against my truck and looked at my hands. The old driver's calluses were still there, the veins showing under the skin. I remember Linda laughing when I talk about numbers. "You remember part numbers better than you remember our anniversary." I apologized by writing our anniversary at the top of my logbook. Today, I added a new line. O is not equal to A+, not Linda. And Evan's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then turned to me. "Toxicology has the samples. The GCMS will be run today. Serology is repeating the test with a tube sample they need another hour to confirm. O. Keller told me to prepare a search warrant affidavit in case the IP address and methanol are enough for probable cause." "What about Jason?" I asked suddenly, thinking of my youngest son, his downcast eyes by the sink. "Where is he on this map?" Evan shook his head. "He's lost. When the truth comes out, people caught in the middle have to pick a side. You stick to the paper trail. I'll handle the social one." I nodded. The paper trail had grown longer. EC 229, preliminary report, O blood type, methanol in the liver. Each link as solid as a rivet on a truck chassis. Each word pulling me further away from the gaslighting fog of that dinner party. As I took my last step toward the parking lot, I looked back at the building one more time. No choir sang, no one applauded. Just the quiet click of the glass door closing. But I knew that just behind that door, a piece of the truth was being preserved by EC 229, by a chain of custody, by a blood test strip marked O on a cold steel tray. If the woman on that table wasn't Linda, then where was she? The question settled a small, heavy stone on my chest, just heavy enough to force me to keep moving. I started the engine, the cool steering wheel familiar in my hands. The road ahead was still long, but this time, I wasn't just driving alone. I had procedures, documents, and people who knew how to read the codes, the dates, and the sources. I drove away, the radio off. In my head, I repeated a 3-beat mantra. EC 229, methanol, O blood type. Each beat was a marker driven into the ground on this new route. And at the end of that road, I believed was Linda alive, waiting for me to knock on the right door. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? Gossip in a town like this never needs legs. It rides in the beds of pickup trucks, floats through PTA group chats, and slips into HOA email chains. That morning, when I was buying a loaf of bread at Lane's Bakery, the entire line went quiet. 1 beat, 2 beat. Then, every head in the place dropped to look at a phone. A wave of shared glances followed, quick but unmistakable. Before I even had a chance to check my own, a text came in from Evan. Whistle sent. Chain clean. It's all theirs. We'd agreed on the strategy beforehand. I wouldn't be the one to spread the story. My job was just to get the truth to the right doorsteps. How it got inside and spread from there was Evan's job, handled through an anonymous Proton Mail account. No signature, no fingerprints, just a subject line whistle and a series of attachments that spoke for themselves. That afternoon, the PTA held an emergency meeting in the school library. I wasn't invited, but I walked by anyway, using a donation envelope for Miss Nell's book club as my excuse. The glass doors weren't soundproof. I saw the IOU blown up on the projector screen. Mark's signature was big and bold, as if he'd tried to press the ink through the table. One mother covered her mouth. A father furrowed his brow. The head of the PTA tapped her pen twice. All reimbursements approved by Mark Carter are hereby frozen, pending a full audit. In the back of the room, someone whispered, "Self-made? Or self-borrowed?" An hour later, the HOA president forwarded the whistle email to the entire residence group, adding a cold note. The reputation of our community is tied to the financial conduct of its prominent residents. We ask that Mark and Amber provide a clarification before the weekend barbecue. In this town, you didn't need to call it an indictment. Everyone understood. On Saturday afternoon, the Collins' backyard was as lively as any other barbecue. Platters of grilled meat, smoked, kids ran in circles, and an American flag was stuck in a flower pot. Amber wore a floral dress, her hair pulled back neatly. The tongs in her hand trembled slightly as she flipped the burger. Mark stood by the grill in an apron that read "Self-Made Grill Master." His laugh louder than necessary. "Come on, everyone, let's just have a good time today. No talk of PTA business," Amber said, her voice a notch too high as she raised her glass. Her smile was bright, but no one returned it. A neighbor said quietly, "The PTA isn't private business, it's our money." Another mother chimed in. The file mentioned creative expenses. How creative are we talking? No one laughed. The barbecue smoke hung in the air like a thick curtain. Amber tried to change the subject, telling the old joke about her old man who's best at signing checks. In the past, the table would have chuckled. Today, there was only silence. The HOA president walked by, gave a cool nod, and said, "Let's talk about transparency on Monday, shall we?" She walked away, leaving a strange wrinkle in the air behind her. Jason stood in the corner of the yard, holding a bottle of water. His eyes met mine. I gave a slight shake of my head. "Stay quiet." He nodded, understanding. That night, the lights were still on at the VFW hall. Gus was at his usual table, playing dominoes with a group of vets. One of the old-timers joked, "Self-made or self-burned?" The table erupted in laughter. It wasn't a cruel laugh, but the kind that comes from men who've smelled smoke their whole lives and know the difference between a cookout and a fire. At 9:30 p.m. Jason video called me. He was standing on Mark's porch, the screen shaking. Inside, I could hear Mark's voice, cracking and hysterical. "Your father leaked it. Who else had those files but him?" Amber was whispering. "Mark, keep your voice down," the neighbors. The porch light flickered. Someone was flipping the breaker, a nervous habit. Jason pulled up his hood, his face pale. I told him, "Go home now, son, and stay quiet." He nodded and hung up. I made a note in my book, Mark losing control in public. Sunday morning at church. I sat in the back pew, under the stained glass window of the Sea of Galilee. Amber and Mark arrived late and sat in their usual spot in the middle. But when it came to the peace be with you portion of the service, the surrounding hands never reached for theirs. A perfunctory nod, a half-finished smile. The silence was heavier than any words. After the service, I stayed behind and opened my notebook. PTA, freeze, transparency, BBQ, silence, VFW, jokes, church, no handshakes. Mike, the town plumber, sat down next to me and handed me a paper cup of coffee. The coffee's bad, but it's hot, he said, and nothing more. I understood. The community had chosen its temperature. That afternoon, the HOA sent out another email. Amber Carter's role as volunteer events lead has been suspended pending the completion of a financial review. The language was as soft as a pillow, but the blow was as hard as a rock. Mark fought back. Amber posted in the neighborhood Facebook group. Our family is a victim of an anonymous smear campaign. Tom Carter, Mark's father, is suffering from psychological instability following his recent trauma. We will be petitioning the court for a competency evaluation to protect him. The post went up. A series of 3 dots appeared as people started typing replies, and then nothing. People read it, but no one commented. Around here, silence is also a verdict. That night, Gus called, heard the PTA is holding a town hall. If you need a sound system, I can bring mine over. I replied, the speakers are for hearing the codes, IOU, final notice, creative, not for drowning out other people. Gus laughed. You just give us the codes, we'll let the codes do the talking. On Monday, the town hall took place in the high school auditorium. I stood outside the doors, sticking to my discipline. Don't become the story. Inside, Mark, wearing a gray suit, walked to the podium. Behind him, the projector showed the REM 2025 tab from the PTA Creative XLSX file. Creative Food and Decor, $2,800. Approved by M. Carter. Mark spoke for a long time about community spirit, anonymous tips, and his family's trauma. His voice broke on the word family. A mother raised her hand. Is that IOU related to the PTA funds? Mark stammered. That's a private matter. The PTA head smiled coolly. Here, when the private matter touches public money, it stops being private. Amber stood in the corner, holding a microphone. Every time the screen switched to the final notice, PNG file, her hand shook a little more. She tried to hand the mic to people who looked sympathetic, but the community's gaze was no longer hers to direct. When the meeting ended, Mark stormed out to the parking lot. Jason called after him. Mark! Mark spun around. Don't talk to me. Your father leaked this. Jason's voice was steady. Dad doesn't know your passwords. But what about the signature on file email sent from your home IP address? Mark went silent. His eyes darted away, refusing to look at his own reflection in the car window. That evening, Evan called. Whistle is clean. The PTA has frozen all their accounts. The HOA suspension is holding. Mark canceled his networking breakfast. I asked, do people believe Linda is still alive? Evan paused for a beat. They believe the numbers. EC 229, O is not equal to A plus IOU. They look at Mark like he's a faulty power line. Stay clear until a professional fixes it. I leaned my head against the truck window, the cool air seeping in. I've learned one thing in my life. A hammer can either break something or not, but the steady pressure of a community never fails. If you press long enough, everything cracks. And the cracks in Mark and Amber's house were now visible to everyone. From the creative receipts, to the IOUs, to the signature on file, others supported. I opened my notebook and wrote the final line for the day. One anonymous email, one attachment, one reputation. Collapsed. I ended the sentence with a simple period. No exclamation point. In this town, social justice doesn't need fireworks, just silence. That morning, the mailman knocked twice, leaving a thick manila envelope with a court seal stamped in the corner. I made coffee, pulled up a chair, and opened the envelope, like I was taking apart an engine one bolt at a time. The bolt heading read, In re-incompetency of Thomas Whitaker, case number IC 447. Inside was a petition, an affidavit signed by Mark Carter, and a preliminary capacity letter from a doctor. Albright, a family friend doctor, along with a request to temporarily freeze my assets and appoint Mark as guardian ad litem. The reason stated, Mr. Whitaker is exhibiting signs of disorientation, paranoia, and is susceptible to manipulation by malicious actors. I put the papers down and poured more coffee. My first feeling wasn't anger. It was a strange sort of calm. My notebook had predicted this move long ago. When reputation fails, the law becomes the life raft. I texted Evan, received. IC 447. He replied with a single word, coming. The hearing was fast-tracked for courtroom 3B, presided over by Judge Ellen Hart, a silver-haired judge with eyes as sharp as a lathe. I went with Miss Ramirez, a pro bono lawyer from the Veterans Association. Evan carried his binder, and Sergeant Miller brought a slim folder. On the other side, Mark and Amber were flanked by a young lawyer in a shiny blue suit, radiating the confidence of someone who thinks he's about to close a box that's already open. The clerk called the case IC 447, in re-incompetency of Thomas Whitaker. Petitioner, Mark Carter. Respondent, Thomas Whitaker. Mark's lawyer stood, his voice smooth. Your Honor, Mr. Whitaker, following a recent trauma, has lost the ability to distinguish fact from fiction and has become obsessed with procedural minutiae. The family is concerned he's being manipulated and seeks a temporary guardianship. He held up the preliminary capacity letter. Dr. Albright confirms a possible cognitive decline. Judge Hart peered over her glasses. Is the doctor present? Asked subpoenaed. The door opened and Dr. Albright walked in, his white coat perfectly pressed, his face a blank slate. He was sworn in and took the witness stand. The lawyer led him through the questions. Doctor, did you sign this letter? Yes. And based on your professional assessment, what did you conclude? I noted a possible decline and recommended a full evaluation. Ms. Ramirez approached, her voice as firm as a deadbolt. Doctor, have you ever examined Mr. Whitaker in person? No. There's in the soul of the Marses. Have you spoken to him by phone or telehealth? No. On what basis did you sign this letter? On the family's account of his behavior. Were you aware that this same family is a party of interest in the investigation involving methanol poisoning and a forged signature on file email sent from their home IP address? I was not aware of the details. So, your letter is a preliminary opinion based on a one-sided account, not a medical diagnosis, correct? Correct. Right? Judge Hart made a note, her voice dry. The court recognizes the letter has no diagnostic value. Mark's lawyer pivoted to the evidence of paranoia. A few photos of my notebook with lines like EC 229 divided by O is not equal to A plus divided by methanol, number ring 2211 underlined. He smirked. A normal person does not live by codes. Ms. Ramirez lifted her exhibit binder. These are not cryptic codes, Your Honor. They are procedural identifiers. EC 229 is the emergency court order to preserve the body. O is not equal to A. Plus refers to the preliminary serology not matching the victim's blood type. The body is not Mrs. Linda Whitaker. Methanol refers to traces found in the liver tissue, which corresponds to the receipt for denatured alcohol purchased by Amber Carter, exhibit, cash 5592. Number ring 2211 is a doorbell log showing a coded entry into the home at 10:11 p.m. When the judge gave me permission to speak, I stood and spoke like I was reading a bill of lading. I collected call log number CL 559 at 7:31 a. M. Mark called the funeral home to push the authorization on file. At the bank, transactions TXID 0117, -0212, and -0316 show withdrawals of $1,000, $3,000, and $4,000. The CCTV footage file BBR12MAR. MP4 shows Amber accompanying my wife during one withdrawal. All are included in Exhibit R. The chain of custody is maintained by Pike. And as Evan took the stand and testified briefly, Ohio is a one-party consent state. The recording devices in my home were placed with my authorization. He presented the photo of Amber buying the solvent at Maple Hardware and the email header from the signature on file message, tracing it to the Spectrum IP address 73.164, which resolved to Mark's home router reverse DNS, Mark Home Mesh Local. All files had SHA 256 hashes with timestamps. Sergeant Miller submitted the ME's preliminary report. Remains: female, 55-60. Preliminary serology: all traces of methanol in liver. EC 229 is in effect. Provisional conclusion: the deceased is not Linda Whitaker. A ripple of whispers went through the courtroom. Mark's lawyer tried to salvage his case. Your Honor, regardless, Mr. Whitaker is obsessed and easily manipulated. The family only wants to protect him. Judge Hart leaned back, her voice as flat as her desk. I see a man who keeps meticulous records, cites his sources, and submits exhibits with case numbers and court orders. I also see a medical letter signed without an examination, and a petitioner who has a direct financial interest in gaining control. Do you have anything more substantive? The lawyer looked down, shuffling his papers, finding nothing to grasp. Ms. Ramirez delivered the final blow. If this court grants IC 447 based on an empty letter and the word of persons of interest in a criminal investigation, it will set a dangerous precedent, stripping a veteran of his rights at the very moment he is preserving evidence for a felony. Mr. Whitaker is not incompetent. He is applying his competency where it matters most, to procedure. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. The court denies petition number IC 447. Order: no guardianship will be appointed, no assets will be frozen. The court admonishes the petitioner regarding the potential for perjury if further misleading medical documents are submitted. This hearing is adjourned. The sound was like an engine catching on the first try after a spark plug change. Clean, smooth, certain. Evan relaxed his shoulders. Ramirez stuck a yellow sticky note on the order denying petition. Miller gave a slight nod. Next, he said, we'll be requesting a search warrant for the router and phones at Mark's residence, based on the IP header and the methanol receipt. In the hallway, Mark lunged a half step toward me, but Amber grabbed his sleeve. You're destroying yourself, Mark spat. I looked him straight in the eye. You just tried to have a court strip me of my rights with a letter from a doctor who never saw me. The court didn't save you, and now you're panicking. Amber gave a thin smile. You think society is going to side with you? I don't think, I said. The PTA has already frozen your reimbursements. The HOA has suspended your volunteer role. The church stopped shaking your hands this morning. Society has already spoken. Today, the court just translated it into an order. The elevator doors closed on them. Jason was waiting in the lobby, his hands in his pockets. He looked me in the eye. You okay, Dad? I'm steady, I said. You? He let out a breath. That's the first time I've ever seen Mark shake. Shaking is a sign of weight, I told him. Things are finally starting to press down in the right places. Miller came back over with an update. Serology confirmed O. The ME is moving on to dental records to cross-reference with Dr. Klein. DA Keller wants the warrant filed today. I nodded. Thank you, Sergeant. Don't let the chain break. On the courthouse steps, Ramirez shook my hand. You kept your composure remarkably well. In a courtroom, the person who controls the rhythm controls the power. I smiled. I was a trucker. Cruise control is a lifesaver. That afternoon, I pulled over in the church parking lot and opened my notebook, nailing down 3 lines. IC 447 petition denied. ME serology equals O, not Linda. Next, warrant router divided by phones. A cool autumn wind swept across the lot, flipping the corner of a flyer for a $9.99 car wash. I thought about Linda. If that body wasn't hers, where was she? And who was the woman under EC 229? The 2 questions settled into the passenger seat like 2 silent, heavy travelers. My phone vibrated. An email from the court the order denying petition was now uploaded. Doc number IC 447OD1. The PDF was in dark ink, Judge E. Hart's signature ending in a decisive stroke. Another email from Evan. Keller has agreed to file for the search warrant at 6 p.m. I'm taking the exhibit index to the DA's office now. A divided by B, methanol divided by receipt, D, IP header, F, call log, and the ME prelim. Hashes to follow. I put the phone down and looked at my two calloused hands on the steering wheel. Mark thought I was incompetent because I read codes instead of emotions. The truth was, I put my emotions in my notebook and took the codes to court. And today, the codes won. I went home, turned on the kitchen light, and poured some water into an old Teamsters stainless steel cup. On the wall was a photo of Linda, smiling in the garden years ago. I said, just loud enough for myself to hear, she's not in there. I know it. The court order knows it. The old-type blood knows it. Then I closed my notebook and placed my pen neatly on the edge of the table, like setting a level. The table was steady, and so was I. The legal game wasn't over. But as of today, the map had a clear route. From the denied IC 447 through the warrant for the router and phones to the name of the unknown woman. And somewhere among all those numbers, Linda had left a trail waiting to be found. A phone call, a security camera, a receipt. I will find it not with a shout, but with another exhibit. The county auditorium on Thursday morning smelled of fresh paint and stale coffee. Folding chairs were packed close together, the center aisle as narrow as a bottleneck. People arrived early, and no one spoke loudly. The PTA members sat in the same row as the HOA board. The plumber, the bakery owner, a few teachers, and the VFW vets all gathered under the pale glow of fluorescent lights. On stage was a projector screen, a clicker, and a microphone that had been tested 3 times. Evan stood beside me, clutching his binder. Sergeant Miller murmured to DA Keller in the front row. I heard the soft tap of a pen. Judge Hart had taken her seat. The gavel came down once. Crack. Public hearing regarding EC 229, the unidentified remains, the cremation process, and related insurance matters. Judge Hart read. The prosecution may begin. Keller walked to the podium, her voice as flat as a tabletop. We will present our case in layers. We begin with the money. On the screen, Exhibit A appeared. 3 lines for TXID 0117, -0212, and -0316, showing withdrawals of $1,000, $3,000, and $4,000. To the right was a still from the CCTV footage, BBR12MAR. MP4, Amber guiding Linda to the counter and accepting an envelope. The person in front of me craned their neck slightly. Amber, in the 3rd row, sat with her back ramrod straight, her knuckles white where she gripped her knees. Exhibit B, Keller clicked, Maple Hardware. The photo showed Amber holding a can of denatured alcohol. Next to it was the receipt, cash 5592. Keller offered no commentary, just read the time, address, and camera number. Exhibit C, the clicker advanced the email header from the signature on file, traced to the IP address Mark Home Mesh Local. Evan took the stand and spoke for exactly 18 seconds about SHA-256 hashes, reverse DNS, and the chain of custody. It was as clean as buckling a seatbelt. Exhibit D, the audio. The courtroom listened to Mark's voice. The accident rider. Fast track this. No fuss. His voice sounded hollow and tinny. The sound of a man speaking in his own kitchen, thinking the walls couldn't hear. The house, Keller said, and the clicker brought up Exhibit E, the doorbell log, number ring 2211, showing someone entering with the keypad code at 10:11 p.m. Exhibit F, the smart meter log, number SM1712, recording a 17-minute power outage, combined with the KDK NCOBDP2 detector having its battery removed. Keller concluded, this paints a picture of deliberate interference. A low murmur rippled through the auditorium. Gus, in the back row, rested his arm on the chair in front of him, his face unreadable. I heard someone swallow hard. Exhibit G. Keller clicked again the ME's prelim report, O blood type. Not Linda Whitaker. Traces of methanol in the liver. A man in the middle rows blurted out, "Good God," before his wife nudged him with her elbow. Keller paused for half a beat, as if to catch her breath. And now for the final layer identity. The screen went dark, then lit up. Exhibit H, a blurry, crooked photo. Linda was in the center of the frame, her hair a mess, a forced smile on her face. The corner of her mouth was pulled tight, as if she was about to say, "Don't." Next to her was Harris Doyle, one of Mark's business partners from a few shady deals. His hand was behind Linda's back, the tendons in his wrists standing out like ropes. In the background was a wood panel wall of an old cabin, and in the bottom left corner, the edge of a yellow Champion mini generator placed too close to the wall. At the very edge of the photo, you could just make out a black zip tie. At the bottom was a time code, 3:12, 2 days after the memorial service. A sidebar showed a GPS ping matching the coordinates of a hunting camp on the North Ridge, the same location where Amber's car had stopped for 37 minutes, according to the telematics from her oil change service. The room was frozen, not because the photo was good. It was blurry, poorly lit, and badly framed, but it was enough. Linda was alive when that picture was taken. The silence in the room thickened like, felt soaking up water. Exhibit H1, Keller said. A 7-second clip from a trail camera. Harris opens the door and pulls an arm inside. Linda is half visible, her face turned away before the door slams shut. Evan stepped to the microphone. The property was accessed with the owner's permission. The chain of custody is tamper evident. This is a public copy. The original is in the evidence room. Judge Hart gave a slight nod, her eyes sweeping over the crowd as if to say, "Don't forget you're in the courtroom, not a movie theater." "The prosecution calls a witness," Keller announced. A side door opened. Sergeant Miller walked out first, and behind him was a thin, silver-haired woman wrapped in a thin hospital blanket. Linda. She walked slowly, a nurse holding her elbow, but she was walking. Her eyes were red-rimmed but sharp. The entire room held its breath. It wasn't a respectful silence. It was the silence of collective shame for all the misplaced applause, for all the premature conclusions. Miller handed her the microphone. Keller's voice softened. "Can you tell us, briefly, what happened?" Linda nodded, her voice hoarse. "I was taken. They said it was to avoid the press. It was really to make me sign things, the quick cremation, the insurance. I wouldn't sign. The door was locked from the outside. The room smelled of alcohol, and gasoline was on my clothes. The generator ran all night." She paused to breathe, her fingers clutching the edge of the blanket. "The man in the photo guarded me. He said Mark needed to handle things quickly. Amber brought food once, told me to just hang on for a few days." Across the room, Jason doubled over, his hands covering his face. I heard Mark jump to his feet. "Lies!" Amber grabbed his sleeve, then recoiled as if she'd touched a hot stove. The DA gave a signal. Miller escorted Harris Doyle down the center aisle, his handcuffs gleaming. Harris looked up at Mark for half a second, the look of a drowning man about to pull someone down with him. Keller's voice was calm. "Pursuant to a warrant, Harris Doyle is in custody for custodial interference and assault. The state requests the arrest of Mark Carter for insurance fraud, tampering with evidence, and attempted homicide, based on the exhibits just presented." "The prosecution has nothing," Mark yelled, his voice cracking. Keller clicked the remote. Exhibit I. A screenshot of a group text recovered from the router and phone warrant. "Hold her till Monday. Easy done. Crumb quick. A. No more pics. Delete after." The timestamps matched the night of the power outage. Everyone in the room seemed to lean back in their chairs at once. Judge Hart looked at Miller. "Proceed." The click of the handcuffs was as final as a nail being hammered into a board. Mark turned, looking for Jason, but his son didn't look up. Amber froze, as if she's just slipped on a wet floor. Keller turned off the projector. The room started breathing again. The head of the PTA dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The HOA president folded her notes and looked at Amber, a look that had no room for business cards. Judge Hart delivered the final word. "The court recognizes a clear chain of evidence with verifiable sources. The money, the solvent, the IP address, the audio, the logs, the serology, the photograph, and the text messages. No single piece is definitive, but the chain, as a whole, is." The gavel came down. The public portion of the hearing was over. In the hallway, Jason leaned against the wall, his eyes red. "Dad," he said, his voice quiet. I put my hand on his shoulder, offering no words of explanation. Some shocks don't need words, just the weight of a hand. Linda walked by and paused. The scent of antiseptic mixed with the smell of damp wood. She looked at me. You still have your notebook? I do, I said. But today, you had your voice. She gave a thin, cracked smile. There was a moment I almost signed, just to get it over with. I know, I replied. Quickly is more dangerous than correctly. Evan handed me a clear plastic envelope, the printouts of exhibits H, H1, and I. The expanded warrant is in motion, he said in a low voice. The router has chat backups. Amber has retained console. Good, I said. Keep the chain tight. If life all the damned, now in damned, Goddard do live, do live, do live, do live, do live, damned, do live, do live. On the steps outside, Gus and a few of the VFW vets were waiting. Is it Amber's turn yet? Gus asked, his voice like the cocking of a hammer. Not yet, I said, but the IP address and the receipt know the way. Gus shrugged. Live rounds don't need to be loud. On the drive to take Linda to the clinic, we didn't turn on the radio. She rested her head against the window, watching the streetlights blur. Are you very angry with Mark? I am, I said, honestly. But anger that shouts it's just noise. Anger that's written down becomes a record. She nodded slightly. You're still reading the codes. I read the codes because emotions can burn up. I said, my hands on the steering wheel. Codes are harder to burn. After dropping Linda off at the clinic, I stood for a moment under the awning, the wind carrying the smell of pine and disinfectant. My phone buzzed. A text from the DA Harris was starting to talk. Mark was maintaining his denial. Amber was asking for conditional immunity. I replied to Evan with a single line. The moral reversal has occurred. The rest is just procedure. I drove home, my mouth dry, my head clear. In my mind, I replayed the chain. Money methanol, IP address, logs, O-type, blood cabin photo. Linda walks in handcuffs. Each piece alone was insufficient. The chain, as a whole, was not. Today's reversal hadn't just saved one person. It had readjusted the town's mirror, forcing everyone to see how quickly they had believed the surface of things. When I got home, I placed the binder on the table and opened my notebook. Exhibit H. Photo of Linda plus Harris' forced smile, hand held off camera. H1. 7-second trail cam clip. Group text. Hold her till Monday. Cram quick. No more pics. Delete after. Result. Mark arrested. Linda alive. Amber wavering. I ended the sentence with a simple period. No fireworks. In this town, justice doesn't like a lot of noise. It prefers codes and silence. And tonight, amidst the smell of printer paper and old wood, I could hear a familiar sound. The sound of the truth falling into place, crack like a gavel ending a hearing. I bet 99% of you will hear this. Sigh and scroll past without clicking. Like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you? And where are you listening? Sentencing day arrived with a thin chill of October. I wore my frayed wool coat and walked into the county courthouse as if entering an old warehouse where I knew every crack in the foundation. Courtroom 3B, heavy wooden pews, the faint smell of wax polish, and the wall clock whose ticking was so clear it felt like someone was counting the heartbeat of the room. Judge Hart sat perfectly straight, her half-framed glasses perched on her nose, the gavel lying flat. She didn't need to say much. The silence she commanded was enough to make everyone sit up a little straighter. DA Keller read the list of charges: insurance fraud, tampering with evidence, custodial interference, and attempted homicide. Each charge landed like a paving stone, laying a path that Mark could not climb back up. Amber sat at the defendant's table in the gray blazer, her hands trembling slightly despite her rigid posture. Mark looked at no one, his eyes bloodshot from what looked like days of no sleep. When Judge Hart asked if they had anything to say, Amber whispered a few words about a family that once had happy moments, while Mark remained silent, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. When it was the victim's turn to speak, Linda stood up. She wore a dark coat and a beige wool scarf. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. Justice cannot give me back the days I lost, but it preserves my faith that the truth cannot be buried. I do not want revenge. I only want the law to see this through to the end. so that no one can ever again use a forged signature and false documents to steal another person's honor. She sat down, her eyes meeting mine, and gave a slight nod. I saw in that nod not complete forgiveness, but the beginning of recovery. The sentences were read: 25 years to life, with consecutive sentences for the lesser charges, amber, probation, and a lifetime ban from holding any position involving community finances. Harris, a shorter sentence in exchange for his cooperation. Judge Hart concluded with a final statement. Procedure can be abused to hide the truth, but it is also procedure that will ultimately bring the truth to light. The gavel came down with a sharp crack short. Final, like a seal closing a file. I didn't feel elation, just the feeling of having set down a concrete block I'd been carrying. I was lighter, but my muscles still ached. The following Sunday, the small church opened its doors early. The townspeople came, some bringing casseroles, others just sitting quietly. Gus walked over and gave Linda a long, tight hug. Mrs. Gable, her voice trembling, apologized. I heard noises that night, but I didn't want to interfere in a family matter. I'm sorry. Linda took her hand and said, no one can turn back time, but next time, just knock on the door a little sooner. It was a simple statement, but it made many people in the church bow their heads. When the pastor invited everyone to offer each other a sign of peace, hands reached out not eagerly, but with a quiet warmth. I took Linda's hand. It was still a little cold, but her grip was firm. That afternoon, I went into the garage. I replaced the CO detector with a new one, the kind with a sealed battery that can't be removed. I tightened the screws and tested the button. A single, clean beep echoed in the space. I let out a breath. That beep felt like a prayer, not long, but straight to the point. I rechecked the breaker box, labeling each switch with a Sharpie. I installed a small UPS to keep the doorbell camera and security system from going dark during a power outage. For me, justice wasn't just in the courtroom. It was in the small details like these. A battery that works, a wire that holds. A week later, I went to the VFW hall. I tacked a small printed sign to the bulletin board. Paper holds truth. Honor holds legacy. It was a small sign placed next to a fundraiser announcement and a list of sick members who needed a visit. People walked by and read it, but no one commented. An old vet tapped the sign with 2 fingers, as if stamping it with his approval. I understood. Around here, the things that are true don't need applause. On Friday night, we had a small dinner. Grilled chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, and a loaf of bread Gus brought over. Linda placed a jar of old-fashioned pickles on the table, and a sharp, vinegary smell filled the air. We ate without much conversation. A real meal needs its silences. After dinner, I wiped down the table, Gus washed the dishes, and Linda opened the window to let the night air in. The window frame creaked. I'll oil that tomorrow, I said. Linda smiled. It's okay to leave it. It's a reminder that a door can be opened. The town, too, slowly found its rhythm again. The PTA met to plan a school field trip. The HOA scheduled a summer barbecue, the list of sponsors now missing a few familiar names. People rarely mentioned Mark and Amber not to cover things up, but because the town had learned the value of a well-timed silence. Jason moved out to stay with a friend for a while, but he still came by for dinner sometimes. I gave him a new key. The locks are changed and the code is different, but the house is still the house. He didn't say anything, just hugged his mother a little longer than usual. One afternoon, Linda wanted to go to the cemetery. She placed a bouquet of carnations on the temporary grave of the Jane Doe from the case. That woman deserved a name, she whispered. I just nodded. Justice doesn't stop at your own front door. It extends to giving a name back to a stranger. On a weekend night, I sat on the porch listening to the crickets. Linda had fallen asleep in the armchair in the living room, the baseball game still on TV. I put a blanket over her and turned off a few lights. On the shelf, the small sign was still visible. Paper holds truth. Honor holds legacy. My phone vibrated. A text from Evan. Case closed. And case closed. I texted back. Copy. I didn't ask about phase 2. Sometimes, silence is a sufficient answer. I went back out to the porch and looked at the quiet street with its old oak trees. The neighbors' lights were off early. An old Ford drove by, its headlights sweeping across the lawn. Normal, but I understood now that normal has to be maintained with discipline by changing the batteries, checking the wiring, knocking on the neighbor's door at the right time, and holding on to the words that need to be said. Linda stirred and called out softly, "If Mark wanted to hear from you one last time tomorrow, what would you say?" I stood in the doorway, my hand on the lock, and answered, "I wouldn't list his crimes. I'd just say the legacy I built was honor. You chose to build something else. Now you have to live in it." I closed the door, not out of anger, but for peace. And peace, like justice, isn't loud. It's a short, clean beep, a well-inked seal, a door closing at the right time, not in anger, but in order and with just enough light to see by.